My mother told me to turn my car around in a blinding snowstorm because my sister did not want my negative energy at Thanksgiving dinner. She said my unemployed brother-in-law Tyler felt uncomfortable around my success. So I went to a five-star restaurant alone and sat next to strangers who treated me with more respect in 1 hour than my biological family did in 30 years. 2 years later, those strangers became my legal parents. And when my biological family showed up uninvited to my wedding to claim their place in the front row, my new mother handed them a foreclosure notice instead of a slice of cake. Before I tell you how I went from the family scapegoat to owning the bank that holds their mortgage, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever chosen your peace over toxic loyalty. My name is Doctor Jada Sterling, and at 32 years old, I save lives for a living as a neurosurgeon, yet I could not seem to save myself from the toxicity of the Washington family. The wiper blades of my Range Rover were fighting a losing battle against the sleet on Interstate 95. I had been driving for 6 hours straight from Boston back to Philadelphia, my trunk filled with custom gifts I knew they would not appreciate. I had bought a vintage Fender guitar for my father, hoping to reignite his love for jazz, and a $3,000 designer handbag for my sister Chantelle because she had hinted at it for months. I even bought a high-end watch for Tyler, her husband, just to keep the peace. I was 10 minutes away from the driveway when my Bluetooth system rang. The screen displayed Mom. I smiled, thinking she was calling to ask if I wanted hot cocoa ready when I walked in. I answered and said, "Hi, Mom, I am almost there. The roads are terrible, but I made it." There was a silence on the other end that was colder than the air outside. Then came her voice, sharp and dismissive. "Jada, do not come to the house." I slammed on my brakes, skidding slightly on the black ice. My heart hammered against my ribs. "What do you mean, Mom? I am literally at the exit. Is Dad okay?" My mother sighed, the kind of sigh she used when I was a child, and spilled juice on the carpet. "Everyone is fine, Jada. But Chantelle is very emotional right now. She says your energy is just too heavy. You know how you get with your career talk and your high and mighty attitude. It makes Tyler feel small. He is going through a transitional phase with his business, and having you here flaunting your wealth is just cruel." I gripped the steering wheel so hard my leather gloves creaked. Transitional phase was my mother code word for unemployed. Tyler had not worked in 3 years. I whispered, "Mom, I drove 6 hours in a blizzard. I have gifts for everyone. I just want to see my family." Her voice hardened. "This is not about you, Jada. For once, stop being selfish. Tyler said if you come, he is leaving and taking Chantelle with him. We cannot have that. Just go back to Boston or get a hotel. We will see you at Easter, maybe." Then she hung up. The line went dead. I sat there on the side of the highway with hazard lights blinking as the snow buried my car. I could not turn back yet. I needed to see it. I put the car in drive and crept the final 2 miles to the neighborhood I grew up in. I pulled up across the street from the 2-story colonial house. The warm yellow light spilled out from the living room window. Through the sheer curtains, I saw them. My father was laughing, his head thrown back, holding a glass of wine. My mother was bringing out the turkey, the one I had wired them $500 to buy, and there was Chantelle sitting on Tyler's lap. They looked like a Hallmark movie. A perfect family that had surgically removed the tumor, and the tumor was me. I looked at the passenger seat where the beautifully wrapped gifts sat. I realized then that I was not a daughter to them. I was a wallet. I was an option. And today I was an inconvenience. I did not cry. Not yet. The tears were frozen inside me. I simply put the car in reverse and backed away, leaving tire tracks in the fresh snow that would be gone by morning. I drove toward the city center, where the lights were brighter, but the streets were empty. Everyone was home with loved ones. My stomach grumbled, reminding me I had not eaten since breakfast. I found the only place open, a historic steakhouse called the Gilded Fork. It was the kind of place my parents always wanted to go to, but claimed was too pretentious. I walked in, shaking the snow off my coat. The host, an older man with kind eyes, looked at me with surprise. Just one tonight, he asked softly. I lifted my chin and said, yes, just one. The restaurant was quiet, smelling of roasting herbs and expensive mahogany. I was seated at a corner booth. I ordered a bottle of Cabernet, the most expensive one on the list. As I waited, I made the mistake of opening Instagram. The first thing on my feed was a post from Chantelle. It was posted 5 minutes ago. The photo showed the entire family gathered around the table, smiling broadly. Tyler was holding the carving knife, looking triumphant. The caption read, "So grateful for a drama-free Thanksgiving. Sometimes you have to trim the dead branches to let the tree grow. Hashtag family first. Hashtag blessed." That was the moment the dam broke. I sat in that expensive booth in my designer clothes and let a single hot tear roll down my cheek. I felt small. I felt stupid. I had a medical degree. I commanded operating rooms. But one hashtag from my unemployed sister could reduce me to a lonely little girl. I quickly wiped my face, hoping no one saw. But someone did. To my right, there was a larger table occupied by an elegant older couple. They were the only other diners. The man was wearing a bespoke suit, and the woman had silver hair styled in a perfect bob, wearing pearls that I knew were real. They were black royalty, the kind of couple that exuded power, not through noise, but through silence. They had been watching me, not with pity, but with a strange intensity. The woman whispered something to her husband, then stood up. She walked over to my table with a grace that demanded attention. I stiffened, preparing to be asked to quiet down or move. Instead, she placed a hand on the back of the empty chair opposite me. She said, "Excuse me, my dear. My name is Vivian. My husband Percival and I could not help but notice you are dining alone on a holiday. Our daughter is stuck in London due to this storm, and her seat at our table is empty. We would hate for good food and good company to go to waste. Would you do us the honor of joining us?" I looked at her, stunned. I looked at my phone where my own mother had told me to sleep in a hotel. Then I looked at the stranger offering me a seat. I stammered, "I would not want to impose. I am not exactly grand company tonight." Vivian smiled, and it reached her eyes. "Nonsense. You have the posture of a woman who carries the world on her shoulders. We would love to hear your story. Come." I stood up, leaving my glass of wine, and walked over to their table. The husband Percival stood up immediately to pull out my chair. He had a gentle tremor in his hand, but his grip was strong. He said, "Welcome. I am Percival Dubois. Tonight you are not eating alone." As I sat down and the waiter brought my plate over, I realized I had stopped looking at my phone. I did not know it yet, but as I took that first bite of stuffing next to the Dubois family, I was taking the first bite of my new life. And 5 miles away, in a house that I paid the mortgage for my biological family, was celebrating their victory, unaware that they had just cut ties with their only lifeline. The war had started, and for the first time in my life, I had allies. The transition from the cold, snowy street to the warmth of the Dubois table felt like stepping into a different universe. The linen napkin I placed on my lap was heavy and crisp, a stark contrast to the paper towels my mother insisted on using to save money for Chantelle's whims. I sat there for the first few minutes feeling like an imposter. My hands were trembling slightly under the table, not from the cold, but from the sheer surreal nature of the situation. Here I was, Doctor Jada Sterling, a woman who commanded respect in the operating theater, yet I felt like a charity case, a stray dog that had been let in out of the rain. I expected them to ask prying questions about why I was alone or why my family didn't want me. I braced myself for the pity that usually accompanied such revelations, but the questions never came. Instead, Vivian poured me a glass of sparkling water and asked me about the book I had placed on the table next to my clutch. It was a biography of early neurosurgeons. That simple question broke the dam. For the next hour, we did not talk about family drama or broken hearts. We talked about ideas. Percival Dubois, it turned out, was a retired judge with a sharp legal mind and a passion for classical architecture. Vivian was a real estate developer who saw buildings not just as assets, but as living histories. I found myself relaxing, my shoulders dropping an inch. I spoke about my residency at Johns Hopkins and my current research on non-invasive brain surgery techniques. I watched them carefully, expecting their eyes to glaze over, the way my parents' eyes did whenever I mentioned my work. My mother would usually interrupt me to ask if I had found a husband yet, or to talk about Chantelle's latest hair extension business. But Percival and Vivian leaned in. They listened. They asked follow-up questions that showed they actually understood the complexity of what I was saying. For the first time in my life, I was not being tolerated, I was being celebrated. However, as the main course arrived, a beautiful rack of lamb with rosemary reduction, my training kicked in. I noticed something. Percival reached for his wine glass, and for a split second his hand wavered. It was not a normal shake from age or cold. It was a rhythmic, pill-rolling tremor that ceased the moment his fingers gripped the stem of the glass. Most people would have missed it. But I had spent 10 years studying the misfiring of human neurons. I watched him closely as he ate. He was hiding it well, using his knife to stabilize his fork, but the tremor was there, subtle and insidious. I debated with myself. I was a guest, a stranger invited out of kindness. It was rude to diagnose someone over dinner. But then I thought about my own father, who had ignored his high blood pressure until it was a crisis because he refused to listen to me. I looked at Percival, a man of dignity and intellect, and I knew I could not stay silent. I took a breath and decided to risk this fragile new connection. I set my fork down gently and looked him in the eye. Percival, I hope you do not mind me overstepping boundaries, but I have been watching your right hand for the last 20 minutes. You have a resting tremor that disappears with intentional movement. Have you been experiencing any stiffness in your shoulder or a change in your handwriting recently? The table went silent. The ambient jazz music seemed to stop. Vivian froze her fork halfway to her mouth. I felt a surge of panic, thinking I had just ruined the evening by being too clinical, too cold, just like my mother always said I was. Percival slowly lowered his wine glass. He looked at his hand, then back at me. His expression was not angry, it was relieved. He let out a long breath. My handwriting has become microscopic in the last 6 months. And yes, my shoulder feels frozen. My primary care doctor said it was just arthritis and stress from the cold weather. I shook my head firmly, speaking with the authority that I usually reserved for the hospital. It is not arthritis, sir. Those are classic early clinical presentations of Parkinsonism, specifically likely early-stage idiopathic Parkinson's disease. The good news is that because the tremor is resting and unilateral, you are in the very early stages. If we start a dopamine agonist regimen, now we can preserve your quality of life for decades. Misdiagnosis as arthritis is common but dangerous because it delays the neuroprotective treatment. Vivian reached out and covered her husband's hand. Her eyes were wide. She looked at me not as a stray girl anymore, but as a savior. She whispered, "We knew something was wrong. We just did not know what. He has been hiding it to protect his seat on the bench." I smiled softly. There is no need to hide it. It is manageable. I can refer you to my colleague in Atlanta who specializes in movement disorders. Or, if you are ever in Philadelphia, I can handle your case personally. Percival looked at me with a mixture of awe and gratitude. You picked up on that over dinner. A doctor dismissed me after 3 appointments and you diagnosed me over lamb chops. That moment changed everything. The dynamic shifted instantly. I was no longer the girl sitting at their table. I was an equal. I was a valuable asset. The rest of the dinner was filled with a different kind of warmth. It was the warmth of mutual respect. We laughed, we shared desserts, and for the first time in 30 years, I felt the specific comfort of being around people who spoke my language. When the check came, I reached for my purse out of habit. My family always expected me to pay. If the bill was over $200, my father would suddenly realize he left his wallet in the car. But before I could even touch my bag, Vivian had already handed the waiter a black titanium card. "Put your money away, Jada," she said firmly. "You just gave my husband peace of mind. That is priceless. Besides, family does not let family pay on holidays." That word echoed in my chest. Family. My biological family was 5 miles away, probably drunk and complaining about me. But here with these strangers, I felt more at home than I ever had in that drafty colonial house. As we stood up to leave, putting on our heavy coats to face the snow, Percival reached into his suit pocket. He pulled out a heavy cream-colored business card with gold embossing. It read, "Percival Dubois, Senior Justice." He handed it to me with two hands, a sign of deep respect. "Jada," he said, his voice steady, "you have a brilliant mind. But I suspect you have a kind heart that has been bruised. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call this number. We are going to be in Philadelphia next month for a charity gala. I would be honored if you would join us." I took the card, running my thumb over the raised lettering. I looked at this power couple standing tall against the winter wind. I realized then that DNA is just biology, but loyalty is a choice. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. "I would love that. Thank you." As I walked back to my car, the snow didn't feel as cold anymore. I watched them get into a sleek black town car and drive away. I was alone again, but I wasn't lonely. I had been rejected by the people who were supposed to love me and embraced by the people who didn't have to. I started my engine and drove toward the highway. I was not going back to Boston as a victim. I was going back as a woman who had just made the most powerful allies of her life. And as for the Washington family, they had no idea that by turning me away, they had just pushed me directly into the path of my destiny. I woke up the next morning in a hotel room that cost more per night than my parents' monthly mortgage payment, yet I had never slept sounder. The sun was streaming through the sheer curtains, casting a golden glow over the untouched king-sized bed. For the first time in years, I did not wake up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering if I had done enough to please everyone. I stretched, feeling a lightness in my chest that I could not quite identify until I realized what it was. It was freedom. But the moment I reached for my phone on the nightstand, the illusion shattered. The screen was lit up with 43 unread messages and 12 missed calls. For a split second, my heart jumped, thinking something terrible had happened. Maybe my father had a health scare. Maybe there was an accident. I sat up quickly, unlocking the phone with trembling fingers. But as I scrolled through the notifications, the concern drained out of me, replaced by a cold, hard numbness. The messages were not about my safety. They were not asking where I had slept during a blizzard. They were about logistics. My mother had sent a text at 7 in the morning. It read, "Jada, I hope you are happy. You ruined the mood for everyone last night. Tyler was so upset he could barely eat. Since you decided to be selfish and not show up, I expect you to at least overnight the gifts you bought. Do not punish us just because you are having a tantrum. Also, Dad needs his blood pressure medication refilled, and the pharmacy says the card on file was declined. Fix it immediately." I scrolled down to see the messages from Chantelle. They were even worse. There was a photo of her crying with mascara running down her face, followed by a long paragraph. She wrote, "Thanks for making everything about you as usual. I had a panic attack because of your bad energy. To make up for this, Tyler and I found a last-minute deal for a resort in Cabo next weekend. It is only $4,000 for the package. I put it on the family Amex, but it needs your authorization code. Send the code JADA. It is the least you can do after abandoning your pregnant sister on Thanksgiving." I sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at the demands. Fix it. Send the code. Overnight the gifts. They did not see a daughter or a sister. They saw a service provider. They saw an IT technician, a banker, and a punching bag all rolled into one. I thought about Percival and Vivian Dubois, the strangers who had treated me with dignity, simply because I was a human being. I thought about how Percival had handed me his card with two hands, a gesture of respect, while my own mother demanded I fix a credit card issue before asking if I was alive. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was quiet, like a heavy door finally clicking shut and locking. I did not reply to any of the messages. I did not send the authorization code. I did not call the pharmacy. Instead, I got up, showered, and put on my sharpest business suit. I packed my bag, checked out of the hotel, and drove straight to the downtown branch of Chase Private Client. The branch manager, Mr. Henderson, knew me by name. He rushed over as soon as I walked in, offering me coffee. He was used to me coming in to increase limits or add authorized users. He probably expected me to cover another one of Tyler's failed business ventures. I sat down in his leather chair and folded my hands on the mahogany desk. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," I said calmly. "I need to make some significant changes to my accounts today." He smiled, opening his computer. "Of course, Dr. Sterling. What can we do for you?" I took a deep breath. "I want to remove my name from the joint checking account I share with my parents. I want to close the supplemental credit cards issued to Chantelle Washington and Tyler Evans effective immediately. And I need to refinance the mortgage on the house at 42 Oak Creek Drive, the one my parents live in but I hold the deed to. I want to ensure that any automatic payments coming from my personal accounts to cover their bills are stopped." Mr. Henderson stopped typing. He looked over his glasses at me, his expression serious. "Dr. Sterling, closing the cards is instant. But removing yourself from the joint account means the remaining balance will be their sole responsibility. And stopping the mortgage payments, well, if they cannot pay, they will go into default very quickly. Are you sure you want to do this?" I thought about the text from my mother calling me selfish. I thought about Chantelle demanding a vacation while I sat alone in a restaurant. I looked Mr. Henderson in the eye and said, "I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Execute the changes. Execute the..." I watched him type. Click, click, click. With every keystroke, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The invisible cords that had tied me to their toxicity were being severed one by one. He handed me a pen to sign the documents. As I signed my name, Jada Sterling, the ink looked darker, more permanent. "It is done," he said. "The cards are deactivated, the transfers are cancelled. Is there anything else?" "Yes," I said, standing up. "Please transfer the remaining balance of my personal savings into a new trust, one that is completely untraceable to anyone with the last name Washington." I walked out of the bank into the crisp winter air. I decided to treat myself to a coffee at a cafe across the street. I sat by the window watching the world go by. It was 11 in the morning. The bank systems had just updated. My phone, which I had placed face down on the table, began to vibrate. It buzzed once, then twice. Then it began to dance across the table with a continuous, aggressive rhythm. I took a sip of my latte and flipped the phone over. The notifications were rolling in like a ticker tape of karma. Notification: transaction declined. Cabo Luxury Resort, attempted charge $4,200. Notification: transaction declined. CVS Pharmacy, attempted charge $85. Notification: transaction declined. Uber Eats, attempted charge $120. Then the calls started. First it was Chantelle, then Tyler, then my mother, then my father. The screen flashed their names in a desperate loop. I could imagine the scene at home. Chantelle standing at a travel agency or staring at her laptop, humiliated that the booking failed. My mother at the pharmacy counter arguing with the clerk. Tyler probably trying to order expensive lunch and getting rejected. For years I would have panicked. I would have rushed to fix it, apologizing for the inconvenience. But today I just watched the screen. I watched it the way you watch a thunderstorm from behind thick glass, safe and dry. I picked up the phone and opened the contact for my mother. I scrolled to the bottom of the screen. My thumb hovered over the red text that said, "Block caller." I whispered, "Goodbye, Mom," and I pressed it. I did the same for Chantelle. "Goodbye, sister." Block. I did the same for Tyler. "Goodbye, Leech." Block. I did the same for my father. Goodbye, enabler. Block. The phone went silent. The vibrating stopped. The screen went dark. I finished my coffee feeling a rush of adrenaline mixed with peace. I had just burned the bridge. There was no going back now. They were on their own, and for the first time in 32 years, so was I. But unlike them, I had the resources, the talent, and the strength to survive. I walked out of that cafe and got into my car. I had a lot of work to do. I had a career to build, and somewhere in the back of my mind I had a dinner invitation from a certain Justice Dubois that I intended to accept. My old life was over. My new life had just begun. 2 years is a long time in the world of medicine. In 2 years, a resident can become an attending. A diagnosis can turn from fatal to manageable. And a woman who once ate dinner alone in a snowstorm can become the queen of her own universe. The morning sun did not wake me up with a harsh alarm. Instead, it filtered softly through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of the penthouse in Midtown Atlanta. I rolled over and felt the heavy warmth of Elijah Dubois sleeping beside me. He was not just the city's most celebrated architect, he was the man who had taught me that love was supposed to be a safe harbor, not a battlefield. I watched his chest rise and fall and felt a surge of gratitude that still caught me off guard sometimes. I slid out of the high thread count sheets and walked onto the limestone balcony. The city of Atlanta sprawled out beneath me, waking up in a haze of gold and steel. I took a sip of my matcha tea and checked my schedule on my tablet. At 8 in the morning, I had a board meeting as the newly appointed chief of surgery at St. Luke's Hospital. At noon, I had a fitting for my wedding dress, which was being custom-made in Paris. My life was a series of meticulously planned victories. I was no longer Jada, the family scapegoat. I was Doctor Sterling, the woman who had it all. 5 miles away, in the peeling colonial house on Oak Creek Drive, the morning looked very different. The air inside the Washington home was stale-smelling of old coffee and quiet desperation. My sister Chantelle sat at the kitchen table, her face illuminated by the harsh white glow of a ring light. She was filming a story for Instagram. She held up a bright orange Hermes bag, angling it so the light hit the gold hardware just right. "Hey guys," she chirped into the phone, her voice pitching up an octave. "Just doing a little unboxing today. Tyler spoils me so much. Manifesting abundance is real, you guys. Hashtag boss babe. Hashtag luxury life." She cut the recording and her smile dropped instantly. She tossed the bag onto the table with a hollow thud. It was a high-quality replica she had bought from a website in China for $80. The real Hermes bag was a fantasy, just like the life she was broadcasting to her 5,000 followers. She rubbed her temples. The house was quiet, but it was a tense silence. Tyler was in the basement, and he had been down there for 3 days. Down in the dark, damp basement, Tyler Evans sat in a gaming chair that was fraying at the seams. His eyes were bloodshot, glued to a glowing monitor that displayed a sea of red lines. The graph was plummeting. Bitcoin, Ethereum, altcoins. It didn't matter what the name was, the result was the same. The $200,000 he had leveraged was gone, evaporated. Tyler ran a hand through his greasy hair. The problem was not just that he lost the money. The problem was where the money had come from. He had convinced my parents, Joyce and Robert, to sign a power of attorney document 6 months ago, claiming he needed it to help them manage their retirement accounts better. Instead, he had taken out a second mortgage on their home. A home that was already technically owned by me, but since I had cut contact, they had stopped forwarding me the mail. They had no idea that the equity they thought they had was zero. Tyler heard footsteps upstairs and froze. He quickly minimized the trading window and opened a spreadsheet that looked like a business plan. He was a master of illusion. To the world, he was a crypto entrepreneur. To reality, he was a thief. Back in the penthouse, I stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the last remnants of sleep. Elijah walked in, leaning against the doorframe with a sleepy smile. "You are up early, Chief," he said, his voice raspy. I smiled through the glass. "I have a big day. We are reviewing the budget for the new neuro wing." Elijah laughed softly. You know my mother is already planning the seating chart for the wedding. She wants to put the senator next to the mayor. She asked if you had any updates on your guest list, specifically the Washington side. I turned off the water and wrapped a towel around myself. I walked over to him and kissed his cheek. Tell Vivian the list remains the same. 0 guests from the Washington side. That part of the list is closed permanently. Elijah nodded, kissing my forehead. Good. I prefer keeping the drama to a minimum. While we shared a moment of peace, the mailman was walking up the driveway of my parents' house. He carried a bundle of flyers and bills. He shoved them into the mailbox, which was already overflowing. My mother, Joyce, walked out in her bathrobe to collect it. She looked tired. Her hair was graying at the roots because she could no longer afford the bi-weekly salon visits she used to demand I pay for. She shuffled back into the kitchen, sorting through the mail. Junk, coupon. Then she stopped. There was a thick envelope from the bank. It had a red stamp on the front that said Final Notice. Acceleration of debt. She frowned. She put on her reading glasses and tore it open. Chantelle was busy editing her video, adding a sparkle filter to the fake bag. Joyce read the first line. Dear homeowner, this letter serves as formal notice that your mortgage is in default. The outstanding balance of $212,000 is due immediately. Failure to pay will result in foreclosure proceedings beginning in 30 days. Joyce dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor, landing next to Chantelle's fake designer bag. Chantelle, Joyce whispered. Chantelle put down the phone. What is it, Mom? I am trying to post. Your father and I paid off this house years ago, Joyce said, her voice trembling. Why does the bank say we owe $200,000? The basement door creaked open. Tyler walked up the stairs, blinking in the light. He saw the letter on the floor. He saw the color drain from my mother's face. For a second, he looked like a trapped rat. Hey, Tyler said, his voice cracking. Is breakfast ready? Joyce looked at him, then at the letter, then back at him. The pieces were starting to click. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the promises of big returns that never materialized. In my penthouse, I was stepping into my heels, ready to conquer the world. I checked my phone one last time. I had a notification from my bank app. It was not an alert about money I owed. It was a dividend payment. Another $5,000 added to my account while I slept. I smiled. I did not know yet that the bomb had just gone off in the house I grew up in. I did not know that my mother was currently screaming at my brother-in-law while my sister cried over a fake purse. But I could feel the shift in the universe. The scales of justice were tipping. And soon, gravity would do the rest. I grabbed my bag, the real one, and walked out the door. My world was ascending. Theirs was burning. And the smoke was just starting to rise. The air inside St. Luke's Hospital was always set to a crisp 68 degrees, but in the neuro-intensive care unit, where I reigned as the newly appointed chief of surgery, the atmosphere was even cooler. I preferred it that way. Cold air kept the bacteria counts low and the minds sharp. I was sitting in my glass-walled office overlooking the skyline of Atlanta, reviewing the MRI scans of a 14-year-old girl with a cavernous angioma. My world was silent, precise, and orderly. It was a sanctuary of logic where every problem had a surgical solution and every outcome could be calculated with a probability algorithm. But 5 floors down in the emergency room bay, chaos was arriving on 4 wheels. I did not know it yet, but the sirens wailing in the distance were not bringing just another patient. They were bringing the past I had surgically removed from my life 2 years ago. My father, Robert Washington, had collapsed in the kitchen of the colonial house on Oak Creek Drive. The paramedics later told the intake nurse that he was clutching a foreclosure notice in his left hand when he went down. The stress of the debt, the sudden realization that his financial safety net was gone, had spiked his blood pressure to a level that his arteries could simply not withstand. A transient ischemic attack. A warning stroke. The ambulance screeched into the bay. Usually family members follow in their own cars, but my mother Joyce and my sister Chantelle had insisted on riding in the ambulance, screaming at the EMTs the entire way. They demanded to be taken to St. Luke's, not because it was the nearest trauma center, but because in their delusional minds it was the only place that matched their perceived social status. They did not know I worked there. They only knew St. Luke's was where the senators and the CEOs went when they got sick. The automatic doors of the ER slid open. My father was wheeled in on a gurney, barely conscious, his face drooping on the left side. But instead of focusing on his vitals, my mother was focused on the optics. She was wearing a fur coat that had seen better days, and she was shouting at the triage nurse before they even reached the desk. "We need a private suite," she announced, her voice echoing off the sterile tiles. "My husband is a very important man in this community. We do not want to be in a shared room with the general public. Do you understand?" The triage nurse, a woman named Brenda who had seen everything from gunshot wounds to cardiac arrests, didn't even blink. "Ma'am, we need to stabilize him first. Please step back and let the doctors work." My father was wheeled into trauma room 3. Meanwhile, my mother, Chantelle, and Tyler were directed to the registration desk. This was the moment reality was waiting for. This was the moment the bubble finally burst. The registration clerk was a young man named David. He was polite, efficient, and completely unimpressed by my mother's attitude. He asked for the insurance card. My mother dug into her purse and pulled out the blue card. It was a premium PPO plan. The plan I had paid for every single month for 6 years. The plan that cost me $2,000 a month to ensure my aging parents had the best care possible. She slammed it on the counter with a sense of entitlement that was almost impressive in its lack of self-awareness. "Here," she said, snapping her gum. "Put him in the VIP wing, and make sure the cafeteria knows my daughter Chantelle has a gluten sensitivity. We will be ordering dinner shortly." David took the card. He typed the numbers into the system. He waited. The computer made a low, buzzing sound. A red box appeared on the screen. David frowned. He typed the numbers again, thinking he had made a mistake. The buzz sounded again, louder this time. "Ma'am," David said, his voice professional but firm. "This policy is inactive. It shows that it was terminated due to non-payment 24 months ago. Do you have a secondary insurance card?" My mother froze. She looked at the card as if it had betrayed her. "What do you mean, inactive?" "My daughter Jada handles this. She always pays it. There must be a mistake with your system. Run it again." "I cannot run it again," Ma'am David said. "The carrier has flagged it. The policy is cancelled. Without active insurance, I will need a credit card on file to cover the emergency admission deposit. The base rate for a stroke workup is $5,000. My mother turned to Tyler. Tyler, who was wearing a suit that was a little too shiny and a watch that was a little too big. Tyler, who had spent the last 2 years convincing them he was a financial genius waiting for his big break. "Tyler, handle this," my mother hissed. "Jada is probably just playing games with the bank again. Put it on your business card. We will sort it out later." Tyler looked like he was about to vomit. He knew exactly why the insurance was canceled. He knew exactly how much money he didn't have. But the ego is a powerful drug. He pulled out a black card. It was heavy metal, designed to look exclusive, but it was actually a secured credit card with a $500 limit. "Put it on this," he said, trying to sound bored, "and add a rush fee for the private room." David swiped the card, declined. The silence at the desk was deafening. Behind them, a line of patients was starting to form. People with broken arms and high fevers were watching the drama unfold. Tyler laughed nervously. "Oh, that is my crypto wallet card. The security is very tight. Sometimes it flags local transactions. Let me try the Visa." He pulled out another card. Declined. He pulled out a third card. Declined. Insufficient funds. David looked at Tyler with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Sir, none of these cards are going through. We cannot process the admission to a private suite without payment. We can treat the patient in the general trauma bay under the Emergency Care Act, but we cannot offer any amenities." Chantelle stepped forward. She was wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, holding her phone as if she were live streaming. "Do you know who we are?" she shrieked. "This is harassment. My father is dying in there, and you are talking about money. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen." My mother slammed her hand on the desk. I demand to speak to the director of this hospital. I want to speak to the person in charge right now. You people are incompetent. You are disrespecting a prominent family. David sighed. He picked up the phone. Ma'am, I am going to call the administrator on duty, but I must warn you, they will tell you the same thing. No payment, no private room. Call them, my mother screamed. Call the highest person in this building. I want them down here to apologize to me personally. Up in my silent office on the 5th floor, my pager beeped. It was not a medical page. It was a security alert. Code gray in the ER lobby. Disruptive family members demanding administration. I looked at the pager. Then I looked at the text message that came through from the ER charge nurse. Dr. Sterling, we have a patient, Robert Washington. Stroke protocol. Family is at the desk screaming at registration. Cards declined. They are demanding to see the chief. I stared at the name. Robert Washington. For a second, I felt a flicker of the old Jada. The terrified little girl who wanted to rush down and fix it. Who wanted to hand over her card and make the yelling stop. Who wanted to save her daddy. But then I looked at the framed photo on my desk. It was a picture of me and Percival Dubois at a charity gala. He was smiling, looking healthy because he had taken his medication. He was the father figure who listened to me. I took a deep breath. I smoothed down my white coat. I checked my reflection in the monitor. My eyes were cold. My resolve was steel. They wanted the person in charge. They wanted the highest authority in the building. They had no idea that the authority was the daughter they had thrown away. I picked up the phone and dialed the ER desk. This is Dr. Sterling, I said, my voice steady. Tell security to stand down. I am coming down to handle this personally. I hung up. I walked to the elevator. The metal doors slid shut, trapping me with my own reflection. I was not going down there to pay their bill. I was going down there to deliver the diagnosis. And the prognosis for the Washington family was terminal. The elevator numbers counted down. 5, 4, 3. With every floor I shed another layer of guilt. 2, 1. Ding! The doors opened. The noise of the ER hit me like a wave. I could hear my mother's voice, shrill and demanding, rising above the din. I stepped out. My heels clicked rhythmically on the linoleum floor. Click, 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 the sound of judgment approaching. I turned the corner and saw them. They were huddled around the desk like vultures. Tyler was wiping sweat from his forehead. Chantelle was checking her makeup in her phone reflection. My mother was pointing a finger in David's face. I did not rush. I walked with the slow, terrifying pace of a predator who knows the prey has nowhere to run. It was time for the family reunion. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime that cut through the cacophony of the emergency room. I stepped out into the chaotic symphony of beeping monitors, shouting voices, and squeaking gurney wheels. But the moment my heels clicked against the linoleum floor, the atmosphere shifted. It was a phenomenon I had worked 15 years to achieve. The nurses stopped their chatter. The orderlies straightened their posture. Even the air seemed to become still. I was not just Jada anymore. I was Dr. Sterling, the chief of surgery, and this was my kingdom. Behind me trailed a phalanx of 6 surgical residents clutching their tablets and clipboards, their eyes wide with reverence. We moved as a single unit, a white-coated shark moving through water. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, ignoring the minor dramas unfolding in the waiting area until I reached the epicenter of the disturbance. There they were, my biological family huddled around the registration desk like a group of angry tourists who had missed their flight. My mother Joyce was still red in the face, her mascara smudged from the exertion of screaming. Chantelle was frantically typing on her phone, likely trying to find a lawyer who worked on contingency. Tyler was loosening his tie, looking like a man who wished he could dissolve into the floor. David, the registration clerk, saw me first. Relief washed over his face so visibly that his shoulders slumped. Dr. Sterling, he breathed out. Thank God. At the sound of my name, my mother whipped her head around. For a split second, I saw fear in her eyes, the fear of being caught. But then her survival instinct kicked in. She saw the badge on my chest. She saw the team of doctors behind me. And she smiled a twisted, triumphant smile. Jada, she screamed, lunging toward me. She tried to bypass the security line, but a guard stepped in front of her. She pointed a manicured finger at me over the guard's shoulder. "Tell them, Jada. Tell these idiots who you are. Tell them to give your father the presidential suite." The entire ER fell silent. Patients in the waiting chairs lowered their magazines. Nurses paused in the middle of triaging. Everyone was watching, waiting to see how the chief of surgery would handle this hysterical woman in the fake fur coat. I stopped walking. I stood 10 feet away from her, close enough to see the desperation in her eyes, but far enough to maintain a sterile distance. I did not smile. I did not frown. I simply looked at her with the clinical detachment I used when examining a tumor. I turned to David. "What is the status of the patient in Trauma Bay 3? David cleared his throat, nervous to speak in front of the audience. "Patient Robert Washington." "Robert. Stable vitals but displaying signs of a TIA. We need to admit him for observation and an MRI. However, there is no active insurance on file and the credit cards provided have been declined." My mother interrupted, her voice shrill. "Jada, stop this charade. Just put your card down. Your father is suffering. How can you stand there and talk about paperwork?" I slowly turned my head to look at her. It was the first time I had made eye contact with her in 2 years. I saw the wrinkles that had deepened around her mouth. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. But I also remembered the snowstorm. I remembered the loneliness. I remembered her telling me I was bad energy. I spoke clearly, my voice projecting effortlessly across the room. "Mrs. Washington, according to hospital protocol strictly enforced by the board of directors, we cannot admit patients to the private VIP wing without a verified payment method or active premium insurance. This facility is not a charity hotel." Chantelle gasped. She lowered her sunglasses, looking at me as if I had slapped her. "Jada, are you serious? He is your dad. You are rich. Just fix it." I looked at Chantelle, then I looked at Tyler. I addressed the group, but my words were a blade aimed at their pride. "I am the chief of surgery. My job is to ensure medical excellence, not to finance the personal debts of patients who failed to maintain their coverage. If I make an exception for you, I have to make it for everyone in this waiting room. That is not how a hospital works." I turned back to David. "Transfer the patient to the general ward C. It is a shared room with 3 other patients, but the medical care is adequate. Start the standard stroke protocol. If the MRI is required, place him on the standard waiting list. He is non-critical, so he will be triaged behind the trauma cases." My mother's jaw dropped. "Ward C. The public ward. You are going to put your father in a room with strangers, with poor people." I checked my watch. I had a board meeting in 20 minutes. "Mrs. Washington, Ward C is where patients with no insurance go. It is clean, it is safe, and it is what you can afford. Unless, of course, Tyler here would like to try another card." I let the question hang in the air. All eyes turned to Tyler. He turned a shade of crimson that clashed with his cheap suit. He stared at his shoes, unable to meet my gaze. Silence. "Good," I said. I turned to my residents. "Dr. Liu, you will oversee the intake of Mr. Washington. Treat him exactly as you would any other indigent patient. No special favors. No jumping the line. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal." "Clear, Dr. Sterling." The resident nodded, scribbling furiously. My mother let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. "Jada, you ungrateful witch, I carried you for 9 months. I made you who you are." I paused. I did not turn around. I simply spoke over my shoulder loud enough for her to hear. "You are right, Mrs. Washington. You did make me who I am. You taught me that everything comes with a price tag. Today the bill is due." I signaled to security. "Officer, please ensure the hallway is kept clear for medical personnel only. If these visitors continue to cause a disturbance, remove them from the premises. The patient needs rest, not drama. I began to walk away. The sound of my heels resumed. Click, click, click. Behind me, I heard my mother screaming my name. I heard Chantelle crying about how unfair this was. I heard Tyler arguing with security, but the sounds were fading, becoming background noise. As I stepped back into the elevator and the doors began to close, I caught one last glimpse of them. They looked small. They looked powerless. They looked like a bad memory that was finally being flushed away. The resident standing next to me, Dr. Liu, looked nervous. "Dr. Sterling, are you okay?" I looked at him, and for the first time that morning, a genuine smile touched my lips. I adjusted my white coat and pressed the button for the penthouse floor. "I have never been better, Dr. Liu. Now let's go save some lives that actually want to be saved." The elevator ascended, lifting me up toward the sky, leaving the toxicity where it belonged. In the basement. The recovery of my father, Robert Washington, was swift physically, but financially, the household on Oak Creek Drive was in critical condition. He had been discharged from the hospital 3 days after the incident in the lobby, carrying a prescription for blood pressure medication and a bruised ego that was far more painful than his arteries. He spent his days sitting in his recliner, staring at the blank television screen because the cable had been cut off that morning. The house was silent except for the humming of the refrigerator, which was practically empty. In the kitchen, the atmosphere was not one of reflection or remorse. It was a war room. My mother, Joyce, my sister Chantelle, and my brother-in-law, Tyler, were gathered around the Formica table. The foreclosure notice was still sitting there under a pile of unopened bills, but they were not looking at it. They were looking at Google. Tyler was scrolling through his phone, his eyes wide with a mix of jealousy and greed. He had spent the last 48 hours researching me. He had found articles about my appointment as chief of surgery. He had found the announcement of the new neurological wing being named after a donor, and my name listed as the lead facilitator. But most importantly, he had found a paparazzi photo from a charity gala 3 months ago. It showed me wearing a backless emerald gown standing next to a man. The caption read, "Doctor Jada Sterling and renowned architect Elijah Dubois at the Sapphire Ball." Tyler tapped the screen aggressively. "Look at this," he whispered. "Just look at the watch on that guy's wrist. That is a Patek Philippe. That watch alone costs more than this entire house. And look at the ring on Jada's finger. That is at least 5 carats." Chantelle leaned in, squinting at the screen. She looked at the ring, then at her own finger where a small cubic zirconia sat tarnished and dull. She let out a huff of indignation. "It is not fair. She was always the boring one. I was the one who was supposed to marry rich. Why does she get everything?" My mother, Joyce, was pacing the kitchen floor. She was not looking at the jewelry. She was calculating. She was remembering the way the hospital staff had jumped when I snapped my fingers. She was remembering the fear in the security guard's eyes when I threatened to have him fired. She realized she had made a tactical error in the lobby. She had tried to bully someone who had outgrown the playground. "We approached this wrong," Joyce said, stopping in front of the sink. "We treated her like the child she used to be, the one who needed our approval. But she does not need us anymore. She has money. She has power." Tyler looked up, a slow, cunning smile spreading across his face. He was a survivor, a parasite who knew exactly how to adapt to a new host. He leaned back in his chair, the creak of the wood echoing in the empty room. "Mom is right," Tyler said. "We cannot demand money from her. We tried that at the hospital and she humiliated us. But rich people have a weakness. They want to be seen as benevolent. They want to believe they are the bigger person. And Jada is getting married." Chantelle rolled her eyes. "So what? She is not going to invite us. You saw her face. She hates us." Tyler shook his head. "She hates us because we attacked her. But what if we change the narrative? What if we become the victims who are just trying to heal the family? What if we remind her that blood is thicker than water, especially now that there is a baby involved?" He pointed at Chantelle's stomach. That baby is our golden ticket. Jada is a doctor. She saves lives. She cannot possibly turn her back on an innocent unborn child. It goes against her Hippocratic oath or whatever. Joyce sat down slowly, her eyes narrowing. What are you suggesting, Tyler? I am suggesting a pivot. Tyler said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We do not ask for a loan. We do not ask for the mortgage to be paid. That is too transactional. Instead, we ask for forgiveness. We love bomb her. We apologize for the hospital scene. We say it was just stress and grief over Dad's health. And then once she opens the door just a crack, we hit her with the wedding angle. The wedding angle? Chantelle asked, confused. Tyler nodded. We tell her that as her family we want to contribute to her happiness. We want to be there to support her. And because we are struggling, we cannot give a gift of money, but we can give the gift of family unity. We force her to invite us. And once we are at that wedding, once we are standing next to her billionaire fiancé and his rich friends, we handle the rest. We tell them our sob story. We let them know that while Jada is living in luxury, her parents are about to be homeless. The embarrassment alone will make her write a check just to shut us up. We call it a wedding gift. The room went silent. It was a diabolical plan. It relied on weaponizing the one thing I had protected myself against: hope. They were betting that deep down the little girl who wanted her mommy was still in there. Joyce nodded slowly, a cruel smile touching her lips. You are right. Jada always was sentimental. She kept every birthday card I ever gave her. She thinks she is hard now, but she breaks easily. Chantelle, send the picture. Which picture? Chantelle asked. The ultrasound, Joyce commanded. The 4D one, where you can see the baby's face. Send it to her with no demands. Just a caption about how much he looks like her. Across the city in my penthouse office, I was reviewing a grant proposal. My phone sat on the marble desk face up. It buzzed. I glanced at it. A text from Chantelle. For a moment my finger hovered over the delete button. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I opened it. The image was grainy but clear. A 4D ultrasound of a baby boy. The caption read, "He has your nose." Jada. We were looking at old baby photos of you today and the resemblance is scary. We miss you. I know things got crazy at the hospital, but we were just so scared of losing Dad. We love you. I stared at the screen. I did not feel warmth. I did not feel nostalgia. I felt the cold, clinical detachment of a scientist observing a virus mutate. Then another buzz, this time from my mother. Jada, I am praying for you today. I am sorry I raised my voice. Seeing you so successful was overwhelming, and I did not know how to process it. I am so proud of the woman you have become. Please forgive an old woman her foolishness. Dad is asking for you. I sat back in my leather chair. I looked out at the skyline. I knew exactly what they were doing. I had seen this behavior in addicts who came into the ER seeking pain pills. The aggression followed by the tears, followed by the charm. It was a cycle. I showed the phone to Elijah, who was sitting on the sofa reading a blueprint. He looked at the texts, and then at me. What do you want to do? He asked. I took a sip of my sparkling water. I want to see how far they will go, I said. I typed a reply. 2 words. Thank you. Back in the kitchen on Oak Creek Drive, the phone pinged. Tyler grabbed it. He read the 2 words. Thank you. He pumped his fist in the air. She replied. The door is open. Joyce let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Good. Now we wait a day. Then we ask about the wedding details. We need to find out where it is and who is coming. Tyler grinned, looking at the foreclosure notice on the table. Do not worry about that letter, Mom. By the time Jada says, I do, that debt will be paid in full by her new husband. We are going to be rich again. They laughed. A hollow, desperate sound that echoed in the empty house. They thought they had tricked me. They thought they were the fishermen reeling in a big catch. They had no idea that I was not the fish. I was the shark. And I had just smelled blood in the water. I would let them come. I would let them believe they were winning, because the higher they climbed, the harder they would fall, and I wanted them to fall from the greatest height possible. I put my phone down and turned back to my work. The invitation list for the wedding was finalized on my laptop. I opened the file. I typed 3 names into a separate tab labeled Security Risks: Joyce Washington, Chantelle Washington, Tyler Evans. I did not invite them as guests. I invited them as targets. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for them to walk into it. 3 weeks before the wedding, I played my final card. It was not a text message or a lawyer letter, it was an invitation. But like everything else in my new life, it was calculated down to the millimeter. I sat in my study with Elijah watching the courier track on my laptop. We had hired a private luxury courier service to deliver the invitations. No stamps, no mailboxes, just a uniformed driver hand delivering a black velvet box to the door. Elijah took a sip of his espresso and looked at me with amusement dancing in his eyes. "Are you sure about the wording on the invite?" he asked. "It seems a bit vague for a black tie event." I smiled, tracing the rim of my cup. "It is not vague, Elijah. It is a Rorschach test, a psychological ink blot. Normal people will read it and see a private, intimate gathering. My family will read it and see shame. I want them to think I am hiding something. I want them to underestimate you." At that exact moment, the black van pulled up to the crumbling curb of Oak Creek Drive. My mother answered the door wearing a housecoat that had seen better days. The courier handed her the heavy box. She took it, her hands trembling slightly not from age, but from the sheer weight of the object. It felt expensive. She carried it into the kitchen where Tyler and Chantelle were waiting. The kitchen table was still covered in unpaid bills and the foreclosure notice, but they swept those onto the floor to make room for the box. Chantelle grabbed it, tearing at the velvet ribbon like a child. She lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of white silk, was a single thick card made of acrylic and gold leaf. It was heavy enough to break a toe. Chantelle read it out loud, her voice filled with skepticism. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Doctor Jada Sterling and Elijah." She paused. She flipped the card over. Then she looked at the box. "That is it," she scoffed. "Just Elijah. No last name. Who sends a wedding invitation without the groom's last name?" Tyler leaned in, inspecting the card. Maybe he does not have a last name worth mentioning. Or maybe she is embarrassed. Think about it. She is a chief of surgery now. Maybe she is marrying some boy toy or a personal trainer, and she does not want the world to look him up before the wedding. My mother Joyce ran her finger over the gold lettering. Private Estate, the location read. Shuttle service provided from the downtown pickup point. No personal vehicles permitted. See, Tyler slammed his hand on the table. No personal vehicles. That means the venue has no parking. It is probably some Airbnb in the woods or a small backyard wedding. She is trying to make it sound exclusive, but she is actually hiding him. She is ashamed. A smile spread across Chantelle's face. It was cruel and sharp. So the high and mighty Dr. Sterling is marrying a nobody. She wants to keep it secret so she can control the narrative. Tyler sat back, crossing his arms. This is perfect. This is exactly what we needed. If she is ashamed of him, it means she is vulnerable. We show up looking like $1,000,000. We represent the Washington family legacy. We remind her that we are the only people who truly know her. And when she sees us standing there looking better than her guests, she will feel guilty. That is when we corner her. Joyce nodded slowly. We need to look impeccable. We need to show her that we are not the charity cases she thinks we are. We are the Washingtons. They did not know that I had omitted Elijah's last name on purpose. If I had written Elijah Dubois, they would have Googled him. They would have seen that his family owned half of Atlanta. They would have been too intimidated to pull any stunts. I needed them arrogant. I needed them bold. The next day, Chantelle went to the bridal district. She did not go to the sale rack. She went to a boutique that required an appointment using a credit card Tyler had opened in a fake business name just that morning. She walked in demanding to see formal gowns. The sales assistant, a polite young woman named Sarah, brought out a selection of navy blue and burgundy dresses suitable for a sister of the bride. Chantelle wrinkled her nose, pushing the hangers away. No, these are boring. These look like maid uniforms. I need something that pops. I need something that says I am here. Sarah hesitated. Well, ma'am, usually the guests avoid colors that might distract from the bride. Chantelle laughed a dry, harsh sound. Honey, my sister is a 32-year-old workaholic who probably bought a plain suit off the rack. I am doing her a favor by bringing some glamour to her wedding. Show me the couture line. Chantelle walked through the racks until she stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes locked onto a gown on a mannequin. It was a mermaid silhouette floor-length covered in thousands of hand-stitched crystals. It sparkled under the store lights like a diamond waterfall. It was stunning. It was dramatic. And it was white, not ivory, not cream, stark blinding white. I want this one, Chantelle said, pointing a manicured nail. Sarah's eyes widened. Ma'am, that is a bridal reception gown. It is white. You cannot wear white to a wedding if you are not the bride. It is extremely disrespectful. Chantelle grabbed the dress off the rack. My sister does not care about traditions. Besides, it is not a ball gown. It is a party dress. And technically, it is champagne ice, not white. Do not lecture me on fashion. Just ring it up. She went into the dressing room. When she stepped out and looked in the mirror, she didn't see a woman about to commit a social atrocity. She saw the golden child. She saw the pretty sister. She imagined the doors opening and everyone turning to look at her. In her mind, the wedding was just another episode of the Chantelle show. She took a selfie and sent it to my mother. The caption read, "Let's see who the real bride looks like." My mother replied instantly with a heart emoji and the text, "You look like an angel. Jada will be invisible next to you." I was sitting in my office when my security team flagged a social media post. Chantelle had posted the photo to her story. I looked at the white dress. I looked at the smug expression on her face. Most brides would have cried. Most brides would have called and screamed, telling her to take it off. I simply took a screenshot and forwarded it to the wedding planner and the head of security. I added a note. The target has confirmed her attire. Proceed with protocol red. I leaned back in my chair. They thought they were crashing a backyard wedding to bully a shameful bride. They had no idea they were walking into a fortress. And that white dress, it wasn't a fashion statement, it was a target. And I had the perfect stain remover waiting for it. The trap was not just set, it was baited. The morning of my wedding day did not begin with birds chirping or gentle sunlight for the Washington family. It began with the aggressive roar of a V12 engine shattering the quiet desperation of Oak Creek Drive. Tyler Evans pulled into the driveway behind the wheel of a neon green Lamborghini Huracan. It was a machine built for the racetrack, but today it was being used as a prop in the theater of the absurd. Tyler had rented the car from a shady, exotic dealership downtown, using a high-interest loan he secured by pawning his Rolex watch, which was one of the few authentic things he owned. The rental agreement was strictly by the hour. Every minute the engine idled was costing him $6, but in his mind it was an investment. He needed to arrive at my wedding looking like the crypto king he pretended to be. He needed to intimidate the man I was marrying. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his sunglasses even though it was overcast. He looked at the peeling paint of my parents' house and sneered. Today was the day everything changed. Today they would guilt-trip my new husband into cutting a check that would save them all. Inside the house, the air was thick with the chemical smell of hairspray and desperation. My sister Chantelle sat in front of her vanity mirror, surrounded by an arsenal of cosmetics. She was applying her makeup with the intensity of a soldier applying war paint. She contoured her cheekbones until they looked sharp enough to cut glass. She glued on eyelashes that were so heavy they made her eyelids droop slightly. She was not trying to look like a guest. She was trying to look like the main attraction. She stood up and stepped into the white dress, the forbidden dress. The gown shimmered under the bedroom lights, a cascade of sequins and tulle that hugged every curve of her body. It was a bridal gown in everything but name. She spun around, admiring her reflection. She took a selfie, holding the phone high to capture the cleavage. She posted it immediately with the caption, "Wedding vibes. Sometimes the guest shines brighter than the bride." Down the hall, my mother Joyce was standing in front of the full-length mirror in the guest bathroom practicing her performance. She was not putting on makeup. She was rehearsing a speech. She held a crumpled piece of paper in her hand, her knuckles white. She cleared her throat and looked at her reflection, forcing her eyes to water. "Jada," she whispered to the mirror, trying to find the perfect pitch of wavering emotion. "My sweet Jada, I know we have had our differences, but a mother's love is eternal. We sacrificed so much to get you to this day. Your father and I gave up our dreams so you could chase yours. And now seeing you here so successful, so wealthy, it breaks my heart that we are struggling while you soar. But we forgive you. We are just so proud." She paused, critiquing her own performance. It needed more guilt. It needed to sound more pathetic. She tried again. "We are about to lose the family home, Jada. The home where you took your first steps. Surely on this day of love you can find it in your heart to help us. Your husband looks like a generous man. Do not let your parents sleep on the street." Joyce nodded, satisfied. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. She wasn't bringing a toaster or a set of towels as a wedding gift. She was bringing a public ambush. She planned to deliver this speech during the toast when everyone was watching, when I would be too embarrassed to say no. Tyler burst into the house, bringing a gust of cold air with him. "Ladies, let us move. The meter is running on the Lambo and we cannot be late. We need to make an entrance before the ceremony starts." Chantelle walked out into the living room. Tyler stopped dead in his tracks. He whistled low and long, and, "Damn, baby," he said, his eyes raking over her. "You look incredible. You are going to blow Jada out of the water. She is probably wearing some boring stiff suit. You look like a movie star." Chantelle preened, smoothing the white fabric over her hips. "You better take pictures, Tyler. I want hundreds of them. I want a full photo shoot by the car. And when we get there, I want you to make sure the photographer gets me in every frame. If Jada tries to hide me, you stand in front of me and block her. Today is about the Washington legacy." Joyce emerged from the hallway, clutching her oversized clutch, which contained the eviction notices she planned to show my husband as proof of their hardship. She looked at Chantelle in the white dress and smiled. It was the smile of a general sending her best soldier into battle. "You look perfect," Joyce said. "White is the color of purity and new beginnings. It suits you." Jada will be furious, but she won't be able to say anything in front of her guests. We are seizing the narrative. They walked out of the house, leaving the lights on because they didn't care about the electric bill anymore. They believed that by tonight, they would be rich again. They squeezed into the Lamborghini. It was a two-seater, so Chantelle had to sit on Joyce's lap, which ruined the cool aesthetic Tyler was going for, but they made it work. As Tyler revved the engine, the exhaust pipe let out a deafening boom that set off a car alarm down the street. He peeled out of the driveway, leaving rubber marks on the pavement. They sped down the highway, adrenaline pumping through their veins. They felt powerful. They felt invincible. Tyler turned up the radio, blasting hip-hop music, singing along about money and power. Chantelle was snapping videos for her Instagram story, screaming over the wind, "We are coming for you, Jada." They were so consumed by their own hype that they did not notice the irony. They were driving a rented car, wearing unpaid clothes, leaving a foreclosed house to crash a wedding they were barely invited to. They thought they were the sharks swimming toward a feast. But as they navigated the winding roads toward the pickup location listed on the invitation, they had no idea what was waiting for them. They thought they were going to a backyard party. They thought I was marrying a nobody. They thought they could bully me one last time. In reality, they were driving straight into the lion's den, and the lioness had been sharpening her claws for 2 years. As the GPS announced they were 5 minutes away, Tyler adjusted his rearview mirror and smirked. "Showtime," he said. Chantelle applied another layer of lip gloss. "Let's go ruin a wedding," she whispered. And with that, the neon green Lamborghini sped toward its destiny, carrying three fools who were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. The GPS on the dashboard of the rented Lamborghini announced that the destination was on the right, but all Tyler could see was a wall. It was a 12-foot-high structure made of limestone and wrought iron that seemed to stretch for miles along the winding road of Atlanta's most exclusive district. This was not the suburbs. This was Tuxedo Park, where the trees were older than the country and the silence was heavy with old money. Tyler slowed the car down his earlier bravado, fading into a nervous confusion. He had expected a backyard wedding at a rented villa, or maybe a country club where he could flash his fake watch and feel superior. But this was different. This was the kind of wealth that made you whisper. Chantelle lowered her window, looking at the massive iron gates that blocked their path. A bronze plaque embedded in the stone pillar read simply, "The Dubois Estate, established 1920. She squinted at it, her mind unable to process the information. "Dubois," she muttered. "Why does that name sound familiar? Is it a hotel? Did Jada rent a hotel for the wedding?" My mother, Joyce, leaned forward from the cramped space of the passenger seat. "It must be a historic site," she said dismissively. "Jada probably rented the garden for an hour." "Do not be intimidated. It is just a backdrop." Tyler pulled the car up to the security checkpoint. It was not a valet stand. It was a guardhouse manned by three men in dark suits with earpieces. They looked less like wedding staff and more like the Secret Service. Tyler revved the engine one last time, a desperate attempt to assert dominance, but the sound fell flat against the imposing dignity of the estate. One of the guards stepped forward, his face an impenetrable mask of professionalism. He held up a hand, signaling them to stop. Tyler rolled down the window, flashing his teeth in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good afternoon, my man. We are here for the wedding. I am the brother-in-law of the bride, so just point me to the VIP parking. I want to keep this beast close to the front, you know what I mean?" The guard did not smile. He did not look at the car. He looked at a tablet in his hand. "Name, please," he asked, his voice flat. "Tyler Evans. And this is Chantelle Washington, the sister of the bride. And Joyce Washington, the mother. We are the head table." The guard scrolled through the list. His finger moved slowly, deliberately. The silence in the car was thick enough to choke on. Chantelle adjusted her white dress, fluffing the tulle around her chest, preparing to be waved through. She was already practicing her wave to the imaginary paparazzi. The guard stopped scrolling. He looked up. "I see a Joyce Washington and a Chantelle Washington, and a Tyler Evans as a +1. However, I do not see your names on the family access list." Tyler laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "That is a mistake, buddy. We are the family. Literally the immediate family. Check again. Jada probably put us under VIP or royalty or something." The guard turned the tablet around so they could see the screen. It was a color-coded map of the venue. There was a gold zone labeled Family and Bridal Party. There was a silver zone labeled Distinguished Guests. And there was a blue zone labeled General Admission. "Your names are coded blue," the guard said. "That is the general admission category. Access to the main driveway is restricted to gold and silver credential holders only. Personal vehicles are not permitted past this point for blue guests." Chantelle let out a screech that sounded like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. "Blue zone. General admission. Do you know who I am? I am the maid of honor." "Well, I should have been. I am the sister. I am wearing a white dress, for God's sake. Do I look like general admission to you?" The guard looked at her dress. His eyes traveled from the sequins to the excessive cleavage and back up to her face. He did not say a word, but his expression spoke volumes. It was a look of subtle, refined judgment that stung worse than an insult. "Ma'am, I am just following the protocol set by the host, Mrs. Vivian Dubois. All blue guests must park in the remote lot 3 miles down the road and take the shuttle bus to the service entrance." "Service entrance," my mother gasped. "You expect the mother of the bride to take a bus? This is an outrage. Call Jada. Call her right now. Tell her that her mother is at the gate, and if she does not open it, I am going to scream." The guard touched his earpiece. "Ma'am, if you cause a disturbance, I will have to ask you to leave the property entirely. The instructions are clear, no exceptions." Tyler looked at the line of cars forming behind him. They were sleek black town cars and Rolls-Royces with tinted windows, carrying senators and CEOs directly through the gates. He felt the sweat trickling down his back. The meter on the Lamborghini was running, and now he was being told he couldn't even drive it in. He would have to park it in a dirt lot miles away where no one would see it. "Come on, man," Tyler pleaded, his voice dropping the fake accent. "Just let us drop the ladies off at the door. Look at them. They are in heels. You cannot make them walk." The guard pointed to the turnaround lane. "Remote lot is 3 miles south. Shuttle runs every 15 minutes. Please clear the lane. You are blocking the governor's vehicle." Tyler looked in the rearview mirror. Behind him sat a black SUV with government plates and American flags on the fenders. The governor of Georgia was waiting behind the rented Lamborghini. Tyler's face drained of color. He put the car in gear and swerved into the turnaround lane, his tires kicking up dust. Inside the car, the screaming started. "He treats us like trash," Chantelle wailed, hitting the dashboard. "This is Jada. This is all Jada. She did this on purpose. She wants to humiliate me. She knows I cannot sit on a bus in this dress. The tulle will get wrinkled." My mother sat in the back staring at the massive mansion that was disappearing from view as they drove away. She was not screaming. She was trembling. She had seen the name on the plaque. Dubois. She had seen the governor's car. The reality was starting to sink in like a cold stone in her stomach. Jada hadn't just married a rich man. She had married into an American dynasty, and the mother of the bride was being sent to the servants' entrance. They parked the neon green car in a dusty gravel lot next to the catering trucks and the portable toilets. The shuttle bus was a generic white van, not the luxury coach they expected. Chantelle had to gather her massive white skirt in her arms to climb the steps, her heels sinking into the gravel. Tyler followed, looking defeated, his flashy suit collecting dust. Joyce climbed in last, clutching her purse like a shield. The bus was filled with distant cousins and former coworkers, people I had invited out of obligation but kept at arm's length. They stared at Chantelle in her white wedding dress. They stared at the angry tears streaming down her face. Someone from the back of the bus whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Is that the sister? Why is she wearing a wedding dress? Did she think it was a costume party?" Laughter rippled through the bus. It was low and cruel. Chantelle squeezed her eyes shut, wishing she could disappear, but she couldn't. She was trapped in a moving metal box heading toward the biggest stage of her life where she thought she would be the star. She didn't realize she was just the clown in the intermission. As the bus rumbled through the service gates, bypassing the fountains and the peacocks that roamed the main lawn, I watched them from the balcony of the bridal suite. I stood there in my silk robe holding a glass of champagne. I saw the white van crawling up the back road like a beetle. Elijah came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Is that them?" he asked softly. I took a sip of champagne. "That is them. They wanted an entrance, Elijah. They wanted to make a scene. I just made sure they had the right audience." The bus stopped at the side of the house near the kitchens. My family stepped out, expecting a red carpet. Instead, they stepped into the steam of the industrial vents, smelling of roasting meat and dish soap. A junior planner with a clipboard was waiting for them. "Name," she chirped. Washington Joyce snapped. "And do not tell me I am in the blue zone. I am the mother." The planner smiled. "Oh yes, Mrs. Washington. We have a special table for you. Follow me. You will want to be seated before the ceremony begins. You are in the back row behind the orchestra. It is a bit obstructed, but it is the best we could do for late additions." They followed her, walking past the garbage bins toward the garden. They were inside the gates now, but they had never been further from the power, and the wedding hadn't even started yet. The service path from the gravel parking lot finally opened up into the main garden of the Dubois estate, and the transition was so abrupt, it felt like stepping through a portal into another dimension. One moment, the Washington family was walking past catering trucks smelling of diesel and dish soap, and the next, they were standing at the edge of a scene that looked like it had been ripped from the pages of a history book about royalty. The lawn stretched out like a carpet of emerald velvet, manicured to a level of perfection that made it look fake. Massive weeping willow trees draped their branches over a crystalline lake where black swans were actually gliding across the water. The air smelled of expensive perfume crushed lavender and the thousands of white orchids that had been flown in from Ecuador to adorn every archway and table. Tyler Evans stopped walking so abruptly that my mother Joyce bumped into his back. He took off his sunglasses not to look cool, but because he needed to see if his eyes were deceiving him. He had expected a tent. He had expected plastic chairs covered in white fabric. He had expected a DJ playing loud music to cover up the noise of traffic. Instead, he saw a glass marquee structure that looked like a cathedral. Inside, a full-string orchestra from the Atlanta Symphony was playing Debussy. The chairs were not plastic, they were gold chivari chairs with velvet cushions. Joyce clutched her purse tighter. Her eyes darted around, calculating the cost of everything she saw. "The flowers alone cost more than her house," she whispered. She looked down at her own shoes, which were scuffed from the gravel walk, and quickly tried to wipe them on the back of her calves. For the first time, the arrogance that had fueled her all morning began to crack. She realized that the foreclosure notice in her bag, the one she planned to wave in my husband's face, was not a weapon here. It was a joke. It was like bringing a water pistol to a nuclear war. Chantelle, however, was immune to shame. She adjusted the bodice of her white sequined dress and stepped onto the grass. She saw heads turning in their direction. In her mind, they were turning because she was stunning. She flipped her hair and strutted forward, her hips swaying aggressively. She did not realize that the guests were staring at her with a mixture of confusion and secondhand embarrassment. To the elite crowd gathered here wearing a white sparkly dress to someone else's wedding was not a fashion statement. It was a scream for attention that signaled a lack of breeding. As they moved deeper into the crowd, the reality of who these guests were began to sink in. Tyler brushed past a man holding a glass of scotch and realized it was the mayor of Atlanta. A few feet away, a woman in a silk caftan was laughing softly. It was an award-winning actress Tyler had seen on Netflix just last week. These were not just rich people. These were the power brokers of the country. The Washington family looked painfully out of place. Chantelle's dress was too bright, too tight, and the sequins looked cheap under the natural sunlight. Tyler's neon green tie and shiny suit looked like a costume compared to the bespoke navy and charcoal suits worn by the men around him. Even Joyce, with her practiced haughtiness, looked small and frail next to the matrons of society, who carried themselves with effortless grace. A wedding coordinator with a headset materialized in front of them, blocking their path to the front row. "Name, please," she asked with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Washington Joyce said, lifting her chin. "We are the family. We are sitting in the front." The coordinator checked her tablet. "Ah, yes, the Washingtons. Please follow me." She did not lead them to the front row where the velvet ropes cordoned off the seats for the Dubois family. She led them past the gold zone, past the silver zone. She walked them all the way to the back to the blue zone. "Here we are," she said, gesturing to 3 chairs situated directly behind a large stone pillar and the sound equipment for the orchestra. "You will have a lovely view of the garden from here." Chantelle gasped. "Are you joking? I cannot see anything from here. I am the sister. I need to be seen." The coordinator was already walking away, fading into the crowd like a ghost. Tyler sat down heavily, his knees hitting the back of the chair in front of him. He was sweating profusely now. The adrenaline of the Lamborghini ride had worn off, replaced by a creeping dread. He felt like an imposter who had snuck into a palace and was waiting to be beheaded. He scanned the crowd, looking for an exit strategy, looking for anyone who looked like a soft target he could impress. And that is when he saw him. Standing near the altar, laughing with a group of men, was a tall figure in a gray suit. Tyler squinted. The man turned his profile and Tyler's blood ran cold. It was Marcus Thorne. Marcus Thorne was not just a guest. He was a venture capitalist known in the underground circles for funding risky tech startups. He was also the man Tyler had pitched his crypto scheme to 6 months ago. Tyler had taken a $10,000 seed investment from Marcus, guaranteeing a 50% return in 30 days. When the money vanished, Tyler had ghosted him, blocking his number and changing his email. Tyler shrank down in his seat, trying to make himself invisible behind the stone pillar. "What is Marcus doing here?" he hissed to Chantelle. Chantelle was too busy taking selfies to listen. "Who cares, Tyler? Fix my dress. The lighting is bad back here." "He is a shark," Tyler whispered, his voice trembling. "If he sees me, I am dead. He knows I stole his money. And look who he is talking to." Tyler followed Marcus's gaze. Marcus was clapping a hand on the shoulder of a man standing with his back to the crowd. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. It was the groom, Elijah. The groom turned slightly, and Tyler saw the interaction. Marcus treated Elijah with deference. He wasn't just talking to him, he was reporting to him. It looked like a soldier talking to a general. Tyler felt the room spin. He had assumed Jada was marrying some new money tech guy or a lucky lottery winner. But seeing Marcus Thorne, the man who terrified half the city, bowing his head to Elijah, changed everything. This wasn't just money. This was power. Dangerous institutional power. "We need to leave," Tyler said, grabbing Joyce's arm. "We need to go now." Joyce shook him off. "Are you crazy? We just got here. I haven't given my speech yet. I haven't given them the foreclosure notice." Tyler looked at the foreclosure notice peeking out of her bag. He wanted to laugh. If they tried to hand that piece of paper to a man who commanded the respect of Marcus Thorne, they wouldn't just be laughed at. They would be obliterated. "It is a trap," Tyler whispered, his eyes darting around the garden, seeing the security guards posted at every exit. "Do you not see it? The remote parking, the seating in the back, the guest list. Jada didn't invite us to celebrate. She invited us to watch." "Watch what?" Chantelle asked, applying more lip gloss. Tyler swallowed hard. "To watch our execution." Suddenly the music changed. The chatter died down. The heavy oak doors of the main house opened. The ceremony was beginning. Tyler tried to sink lower into his chair, but the white sequins of Chantelle's dress acted like a beacon, reflecting the sun, catching every eye, including Marcus Thorne's. From across the aisle 50 feet away, Marcus looked up. His eyes scanned the back row. He saw the flash of white. He saw the neon green tie. And then he saw Tyler. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply tapped the earpiece of the security guard standing next to him and pointed a discreet finger toward the blue zone. Tyler stopped breathing. He watched the guard nod and start walking toward them. The wedding march began to play, beautiful and triumphant, but to Tyler Evans, it sounded exactly like a funeral dirge. The trap had snapped shut, and he was the rat caught in the middle of the most expensive cage in the world. The string quartet was playing a soft rendition of a classical piece, but Chantelle Washington heard only the imaginary shutter clicks of paparazzi cameras. She had grown bored of the obscured view from the blue zone seats behind the stone pillar. The reception area was filling up with guests mingling before the main dinner, and Chantelle decided that this was her moment. She stood up, smoothing the thousands of white sequins that covered her body. In the afternoon sun, she looked less like a guest and more like a disco ball that had crashed a funeral. She turned to Tyler, who was still sweating in his seat. "Grab your phone," she commanded. "We are going to the flower wall. I saw the bridesmaids taking photos there earlier. The lighting is perfect." Tyler hesitated, looking at the security guards posted around the perimeter. "Chantelle, I do not think we are allowed in the gold zone. That is for the wedding party." Chantelle rolled her eyes, grabbing his arm. "I am the sister of the bride. That makes me the wedding party. Stop being a coward and take my picture." She marched out of the shadows of the back row and straight into the center of the lawn. The guests parted ways, not out of respect but out of sheer confusion. They whispered behind their champagne flutes, wondering why a woman in a bridal gown was stomping through the grass. Chantelle ignored them. She reached the massive wall of white hydrangeas and orchids that had cost more than her entire college tuition. She pushed past a confused cousin and struck a pose. She popped her hip, threw her head back, and waited for the attention she believed she deserved. From the marble terrace overlooking the garden, Vivienne Dubois watched this spectacle unfold. She was wearing a midnight blue gown that whispered of old money and quiet power. She did not look angry. She looked like a master chess player who had just seen her opponent make a fatal mistake. She adjusted the diamond brooch on her shoulder and caught the eye of the head of catering, a man named Henri, who had been with the Dubois family for 20 years. Vivienne did not speak. She simply tilted her head toward the woman in the white dress and then tapped her finger once against her own wineglass. Henri nodded imperceptibly. He turned to one of the servers, a young man carrying a heavy tray loaded with glasses of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon. Henri whispered 2 words into the server's ear. Protocol read. The server moved through the crowd with the grace of a dancer. He navigated around the mayor. He sidestepped the senator. He charted a collision course directly for the flower wall where Chantelle was currently trying to get the perfect angle of her cleavage. Chantelle saw Tyler fumbling with his phone. "Get closer," she snapped, taking a step forward. "You are too far away. Capture the sparkle." She took a blind step backward right into the path of the oncoming server. It happened in slow motion. The server did not trip. He simply allowed physics to take its course. As Chantelle spun around her elbow, clipped the edge of the silver tray, the server let go. Gravity took over. 12 glasses of deep dark red wine, expensive heavy-bodied Cabernet, cascaded through the air. They did not fall on the grass. They fell directly onto the pristine white sequins of Chantelle's dress. The sound of shattering glass was followed immediately by a scream that silenced the entire garden. Chantelle looked down. The wine had splashed across her chest, soaked into her stomach, and dripped all the way down to her knees. The white dress was gone. In its place was a soggy crimson disaster that looked like a crime scene. "My dress," Chantelle shrieked, her hands hovering uselessly over the stains. "You idiot! You ruined my dress. Do you know how much this cost?" The server looked terrified, apologizing profusely, but before Chantelle could slap him, a cool voice cut through the air. "Oh dear, what a catastrophe." The crowd parted and Vivienne Dubois stepped forward. She looked at the sobbing Chantelle in the ruined dress. She did not offer a napkin. She did not offer sympathy. She offered a smile that was sharp enough to cut skin. "I am so terribly sorry," Vivienne said, her voice projecting clearly to the silent guests. "But you know what they say about bad luck at weddings. Perhaps the universe was just trying to correct a breach of etiquette." Chantelle looked up, mascara running down her face. "What are you talking about? This is a $3,000 gown." Vivienne stepped closer, her voice dropping to an icy whisper that only Chantelle and Tyler could hear. "It is a white gown, my dear. And in this house, the only woman who wears white on her wedding day is the bride. Since you seem to have forgotten your manners, my staff was kind enough to help you recolor your outfit." Chantelle gasped, realizing it was intentional. "You did this," she hissed. Vivienne straightened up, addressing the head of catering. "Henri, please take this poor woman to the service tent. Get her one of the spare staff uniforms. We cannot have her walking around looking like a bloody mess. It is upsetting the guests." "But I am the sister," Chantelle wailed. "Then act like one." Vivienne snapped, the smile vanishing. "You have 2 choices. You can put on the black catering cloak and sit quietly in the back, or you can be escorted off the property by the police for causing a disturbance. Choose wisely." Chantelle looked around. Hundreds of eyes were staring at her. No one was helping. Even Tyler had backed away, pretending to check his phone. She was beaten. She hung her head. "I will take the cloak," she whispered. Henri led her away, the wet dress squelching with every step. 10 minutes later, Chantelle returned to her seat in the blue zone. She was no longer a sparkling disco ball. She was wrapped in an oversized black wool cape that smelled of mothballs usually reserved for the valet parking staff during winter. She pulled the hood up to hide her face, disappearing into the shadows of the stone pillar. Vivian watched from the terrace until Chantelle was seated. Then she turned back to the guests and raised her glass. Now that the distraction has been handled, she said smoothly, "Let the celebration begin." The orchestra struck up a waltz. The guests laughed and returned to their conversations. And in the back row, the golden child sat in darkness, wearing the uniform of a servant while the scapegoat prepared to walk down the aisle as a queen. The balance of power had shifted, and the wine stain was just the first mark of the reckoning to come. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the garden. Under the glass marquee, the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the heavy silence of 300 guests holding their breath. I stood at the altar holding Elijah's hands. My palms were sweating not from nerves, but from the sheer magnitude of the moment. I looked past his shoulder to the back of the room, where the shadows were deepest. I could just barely make out the outline of my biological family sitting in the blue zone. Chantelle was huddled in her black catering cloak, and my mother was sitting rigid like a statue. They were watching, expecting a standard ceremony. They were expecting the part where the officiant asks, "Who gives this woman to be married?" They were waiting for that moment to perhaps stand up or make a scene to assert their ownership over me. But that question never came. Because the man standing between us, wearing the judicial robes over his tuxedo, was not just an officiant. He was Justice Percival Dubois, and he had prepared a different script. Elijah squeezed my hands, drawing my attention back to his eyes. They were dark and fierce, filled with a protective intensity that made my knees weak. He took a deep breath and began his vows. He did not use the standard cue cards. He spoke from memory, his voice projecting clear and strong without a microphone. "Jada," he began, "when I met you 2 years ago, you were a woman who had built a fortress around her heart. You were the strongest person I had ever known, but you were also the loneliest. You had built an empire from scratch. You became a chief of surgery. You saved thousands of lives. And you did it all while carrying the weight of being told you were not enough." I felt a tear slip down my cheek. Elijah continued, his voice rising slightly, ensuring every word landed like a blow to the people in the back row. "I watched you spend holidays alone. I watched you work double shifts to avoid going home to an empty apartment. I watched you pay bills for people who never said thank you. But today, that ends. Today you are not just gaining a husband. You are not just gaining a partner. You are finally receiving the one thing you have deserved since the day you were born. A safety net. You will never have to stand alone in the snow again." The guests wiped their eyes. It was beautiful, but it was about to get legal. Percival cleared his throat. He looked at Elijah, and then he looked at me. His expression softened from the stern judge to the loving father. "Before I pronounce you husband and wife," Percival announced, his voice booming with authority, "there is a legal matter that must be addressed for the public record." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. In the back row, I saw Tyler Evans lean forward, hoping this was the moment the wedding would be stopped. Maybe he thought a secret debt had surfaced. Percival reached into his robe and pulled out a leather-bound document. It was stamped with the official seal of the Supreme Court of Georgia. "Marriage acts as a binding contract between two peers," Percival said, holding the document high. "But family is a covenant of blood or of choice." For 32 years, Jada has walked this earth carrying the name of a lineage that did not appreciate her brilliance, a name that was used to chain her to obligation rather than lift her in love. He opened the folder. The sound of the heavy paper turning echoed in the silence. 6 months ago, Jada and I filed a petition with the family court. It is a rare proceeding known as adult adoption. It allows a person over the age of 18 to sever their legal ties with their biological parents and be formally adopted by a new family. I heard a gasp from the back of the room. It was my mother. The sound was sharp and strangled. Percival looked directly at the back row. His eyes were hard as flint. As of this morning, the final decree has been signed and sealed. The birth certificate of Jada Washington has been legally sealed and amended. The state of Georgia no longer recognizes Robert and Joyce Washington as her next of kin. They have no legal claim to her estate. They have no right to make medical decisions for her. And most importantly, they no longer share her name. He turned to me smiling with tears in his eyes. Jada, my daughter, it is my honor to be the first to introduce you to the world not as Jada Washington, but as Jada Dubois. And now as you enter this marriage, you do so not as a woman escaping her past, but as a woman standing firmly in her future. The crowd erupted. It wasn't polite applause, it was a roar of approval. The senators and CEOs understood exactly what had just happened. They understood the power move. I had not just married into the family, I had been absorbed into the dynasty. I looked at the back row. My mother had slumped back in her chair, covering her mouth with her hand. The foreclosure notice in her purse was now useless. She couldn't guilt-trip a daughter she no longer legally had. The biological tie had been severed with a gavel strike. Elijah smiled at me, wiping the tear from my chin. "Hello, Jada Dubois," he whispered. "Hello, husband," I whispered back. Percival closed the book. "By the power vested in me by the state of Georgia, and by the love vested in me as your father, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." As Elijah pulled me in for the kiss, I felt lighter than air. The name Washington fell off me like dead skin. I was free. And as the music swelled and the guests cheered, I knew that the three people in the back row were realizing that they had not just lost a daughter. They had lost their retirement plan. They had lost their punching bag. And they were currently trespassing on the property of a family that protected its own with ruthless efficiency. The reception dinner was a symphony of silver clinking against fine china, and the low murmur of billionaires making deals over Wagyu beef. But in the back corner of the glass marquee sat three people who had lost their appetite. The Washington family table was situated so far from the action that they were practically dining with the sound technicians. Tyler Evans picked at his plate of sea bass, his knee bouncing up and down with a nervous energy that was starting to look like a medical condition. He watched the head table where I sat next to Elijah, laughing at something the governor had whispered. Tyler looked at his watch. He looked at the empty wine glass in front of him. And then he looked at the exit. He knew he should run. Every instinct in his body screamed that he was out of his depth. He had seen Marcus Thorne earlier. He had seen the security guards watching him. But greed is a powerful blinder. Tyler convinced himself that there was still one play left. He convinced himself that Elijah didn't know about the scams. He convinced himself that if he could just get 5 minutes alone with the groom, he could pitch him on the crypto fund, get a quick check for $10,000, and disappear before anyone realized the truth. It was the delusion of a desperate man. He stood up, buttoning his cheap polyester jacket. He smoothed down his neon green tie. "Where are you going?" Chantelle hissed from beneath her black catering cloak. She looked like a grim reaper who had lost her scythe. "Sit down, Tyler. Everyone is looking at us." "I am going to network," Tyler whispered harshly. "That is Elijah Dubois up there. He is an architect, but his family is worth millions. If I can get him to invest in the Alpha Protocol coin, we can pay off the house before the foreclosure goes through. I am a businessman, Chantelle. Watch me work." He walked away from the blue zone, navigating through the tables. He moved like a shark in a tuxedo, but everyone else saw him as a minnow swimming into a propeller. He walked past the senator's table. He walked past the table of neurosurgeons from my hospital. He reached the gold zone where the air smelled different. It smelled of confidence. Elijah was standing near the microphone, adjusting the height for the toasts. He looked relaxed, holding a tumbler of amber liquid that probably cost more than Tyler's car. Tyler saw his opening. He stepped onto the dance floor, ignoring the glare of the best man who was standing just to the right of the stage. "Elijah," Tyler called out, putting on his best salesman smile. "Brother, congratulations on the big day." Elijah stopped. He turned slowly. He looked down from the slight elevation of the stage. He did not smile. He simply stared at Tyler with an expression of mild curiosity, as if he were looking at a bug he found on his windshield. Tyler Evans. Elijah said, his voice calm and deep. I was wondering when you would come say hello. Tyler climbed the 2 steps onto the stage. He reached out to shake Elijah's hand, but Elijah did not take it. Tyler awkwardly pulled his hand back, wiping it on his pants. Yeah, man, I just wanted to welcome you to the family. Tyler stammered, his confidence faltering under Elijah's gaze. You know, Jada and I go way back. I handle the finances for the Washington family. I run a boutique investment firm, digital assets, high yield. Since we are brothers now, I wanted to offer you a ground floor opportunity, exclusive to family. The room had gone quiet. The band had stopped playing. 300 guests turned to look at the man in the shiny suit standing next to the groom. Tyler thought they were listening to his pitch. He puffed out his chest. You handle the finances. Elijah repeated, his voice amplified by the microphone. Is that what you call it? Tyler chuckled nervously. Well, you know how it is. High risk, high reward. I manage the portfolio. Elijah nodded slowly. He took a sip of his drink. Then he turned to the room, addressing the crowd as if he were making a toast. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The room fell silent. Tyler beamed, thinking Elijah was about to introduce him. This man here is Tyler Evans, my new brother-in-law, Elijah announced. He just told me he runs a boutique investment firm. But I think he is being too modest. He is actually quite famous in the financial sector. In fact, just last week, I was reviewing the accounts of a certain pension fund that I advise, and I noticed a very interesting discrepancy. Tyler's smile froze. His stomach dropped to his shoes. Elijah turned back to Tyler, his eyes turning to ice. You see, Tyler, $200,000 went missing from that fund. It was transferred to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called TE Ventures. And when my forensic accountants traced the IP address of the transfer, it did not come from a high-rise office. It came from the basement of a house on Oak Creek Drive. Tyler took a step back. That is a misunderstanding, he squeaked. It was a glitch. I can explain. Elijah took a step forward, towering over him. And then there is the matter of identity theft. You opened 7 credit cards in the name of Robert and Joyce Washington without their consent. You maxed them out on online gambling and luxury car rentals. That is not investing, Tyler. That is a federal crime. Chantelle stood up at the back table. No, she screamed. That is a lie. My husband is a genius. He is a CEO. Elijah looked at the best man standing to his right. He was a tall, broad man with a military bearing. Tyler, Elijah said softly, I would like you to meet my best man. This is David Clark. You might know him better by his title. He is the sheriff of Fulton County, and he has been looking for you for 3 months. Tyler spun around. The best man was not reaching for a toast glass. He was reaching behind his tuxedo jacket. The metallic sound of handcuffs being unclipped echoed through the silent room. It was a sound that signaled the end of the party and the end of Tyler's life as he knew it. Sheriff Clark stepped forward. Tyler Evans, you are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Tyler began to hyperventilate. No, wait. Jada, help me. Tell them. We are family. He looked at me sitting at the head table. I sat there calmly sipping my champagne. I did not look away. I watched him. I watched the man who had called me selfish. I watched the man who had laughed when my card was declined. I watched him panic. I leaned into my own table microphone just enough for my voice to carry. I am sorry, Tyler, I said smoothly. I would love to help, but my husband handles the security, and I strictly handle the trash. The sheriff spun Tyler around, slamming him against the speaker tower. The click of the handcuffs was loud and final. Snick, snick. Chantelle came running from the back of the room, her black catering cloak flapping behind her like bat wings. Stop it, she shrieked. You cannot arrest him here. This is a wedding. He is a businessman. He is just having a liquidity issue. Jada, pay them. Write them a check. Do not let them take him." Elijah looked at Chantelle. He did not raise his voice. He simply spoke into the microphone with the authority of a king, dismissing a jester. "Chantelle, your husband is not a businessman. He is a con artist who bankrupted your parents, and if you do not step back, you will be arrested for obstruction of justice." Two deputies appeared from the shadows of the garden. They grabbed Tyler by the arms. He was crying now, snot running down his face, begging for mercy. "Do not do this," he sobbed. "I can pay it back. I just need more time, just one more trade." Sheriff Clark leaned into Tyler's ear. "You will have plenty of time, about 15 to 20 years of it." They dragged him off the stage. They dragged him past the governor. They dragged him past the investors he wanted to impress. They dragged him right past the cake he would never get to eat. Chantelle fell to her knees in the grass, sobbing into her hands. But nobody moved to comfort her. The guests watched with a mixture of shock and satisfaction. They knew a predator when they saw one, and they had just watched the predator get eaten. Elijah straightened his jacket. He turned back to the crowd. He raised his glass as if nothing had happened. "My apologies for the interruption, everyone. It seems we had some uninvited pests in the garden. But now that the air is clear, please enjoy the filet mignon. It is excellent tonight." The band struck up a lively jazz number. The conversation resumed. Waiters swooped in to refill glasses. And in the distance, the wail of a police siren grew louder and then faded away into the night, carrying Tyler Evans to his new home. A home that was definitely not a penthouse. The blue flashing lights of the police cruiser had faded into the night, taking the loud, frantic energy of Tyler Evans with them. The reception had returned to a polite murmur, the kind of sophisticated noise that money makes when it is trying to ignore a disturbance. The string quartet resumed playing a waltz, and the waiters moved seamlessly among the tables, pouring vintage Bordeaux, as if a man had not just been dragged away in handcuffs. But at the back table in the shadows of the blue zone, the silence was absolute. My mother Joyce and my sister Chantelle sat frozen in their chairs. They looked like statues of misery. Chantelle was huddled inside the oversized black catering cloak, staring blankly at the empty chair where her husband had been sitting 5 minutes ago. My mother was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white, her face a mask of terror and confusion. I stood up from the head table. I did not rush. I smoothed the silk of my wedding gown and picked up a crystal flute of champagne. I picked up a thick manila folder that had been resting under my napkin. Elijah looked up at me. He placed a hand on my arm not to stop me, but to steady me. "Do you want me to come with you?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "Number 1. I need to do this alone. This is the final surgery." I walked across the ballroom. My dress made a soft swishing sound against the marble floor, a sound that seemed to herald the arrival of judgment. Guests turned to look at me smiling, raising their glasses thinking I was making rounds to greet family. They did not know I was walking toward an execution. I reached the back table. My shadow fell across the white tablecloth, darkening the space between my mother and sister. They looked up. For the first time in my life, I did not see arrogance in their eyes. I did not see judgment. I saw fear, pure, unadulterated fear. "Jada." My mother whispered, her voice trembling. "Jada, please. You have to help us. They took him. They took Tyler. He has the keys to the rental car. He has the keys to the house. We are stranded." I took a sip of champagne, enjoying the cold bubbles against my tongue. I did not sit down. I stood over them, towering in my heels and my crown. "He did not have the keys to the house, Mother." I said, my voice calm and conversational. "Because it is not his house. And as of this morning, it is not your house either." I dropped the manila folder onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud, rattling the silverware. The sound was more violent than a scream. Joyce looked at the folder. She reached out with a shaking hand and opened it. The first page was a legal document stamped with the seal of the foreclosure court, but stapled to the front was a receipt, a transfer confirmation. "What is this?" Joyce asked, her voice barely audible. I leaned in closer, resting one hand on the back of the empty chair. "2 years ago, you called me on Thanksgiving and told me to turn my car around. You told me that my presence made Tyler uncomfortable. You told me that I was negative energy. You chose a man who was lying to you over the daughter who was trying to love you." Chantelle looked up from her hood, her eyes red and swollen. "We didn't know, Jada. We didn't know he was stealing. You didn't want to know," I cut her off sharply. "You enjoyed the trips. You enjoyed the dinners. You enjoyed pretending you were better than me. You were so busy looking down on me that you didn't notice he was digging a grave under your feet." I tapped the folder with a manicured nail. "When the bank initiated foreclosure proceedings last week, the debt went up for auction. Usually a bank buys it back. But sometimes a private investor steps in. I had my lawyers monitoring the listing every hour of every day." My mother's eyes widened as she read the name on the transfer of deed line. It did not say Bank of America. It said the Sterling Dubois Trust. "You bought it," she gasped. "You bought our mortgage." I corrected her. "I bought your debt, and since you have defaulted on payments for 6 months, I am exercising my right as the new lien holder." I took another sip of champagne, watching the realization sink in. "Tyler is going to prison for a very long time," I said. "He won't be needing a place to stay. And as for you two, I am feeling generous. Usually the eviction process takes 30 days, but I find that timeline too long for people who have overstayed their welcome in my life." I leaned down until my face was level with my mother's. "I am giving you 7 days, 1 week. You have 7 days to remove your personal belongings from the property. Whatever is left after next Sunday will be hauled away by a junk removal service. I plan to renovate the house. I think I will turn it into a shelter for at-risk youth. You know, children who were abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect them. Poetic, don't you think?" My mother began to cry, great heaving sobs that shook her thin frame. "Jada, you cannot do this. We are your parents. Where will we go? We have no money. Tyler took everything." I stood up straight, adjusting my veil. "I hear Florida is nice this time of year," I said, cold as ice. "Or maybe you can ask Chantelle. She is the golden child, isn't she? Surely she can manifest a solution with all that positive energy she loves to talk about on Instagram." Chantelle looked away, unable to meet my gaze. She was broken. The fantasy was gone. I turned to walk away, but I stopped for one final thought. "Oh, and Mom, do not bother calling me. As the judge mentioned earlier, I am a Dubois now. Jada Washington died on that snowy highway 2 years ago. You killed her. Do not be surprised that she isn't here to save you now." I turned my back on them. I walked away from the table, away from the sobbing and the begging. I walked back toward the light, toward the music, toward the man who loved me. I felt a weight lifting off my chest, a weight I had carried since childhood. I had burned the bridge, and I was watching the ashes float away on the wind. It was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. I reached the head table and sat down next to Elijah. He took my hand and kissed the knuckles. "Is it done?" he asked. I smiled, taking a bite of my wedding cake. It was sweet, rich, and perfect. "It is done," I whispered. "They have 7 days, and we have forever." I did not look back. The walk from the shadowed edge of the garden back to the illuminated dance floor was only 50 feet, but it felt like I was crossing a bridge between 2 different lifetimes. Behind me, I could hear the faint sounds of a struggle. It was not a violent brawl, but the pathetic, desperate shuffling of 2 women who refused to accept that the show was over. I heard the calm, low voices of the security team instructing my mother and sister to stand up. I heard Chantelle let out one last ragged protest, something about her rights and her dress, but it was quickly swallowed by the swelling music of the orchestra. I reached the edge of the dance floor, where the light was warm and golden. Elijah was waiting for me. He did not look at the commotion behind me. He did not look at the guests who were whispering. He looked only at me. He held out his hand, palm up. It was a steady hand, a hand that built skyscrapers, a hand that had signed the adoption papers that gave me a new name. "Are you ready, Mrs. Dubois?" he asked, his voice cutting through the noise in my head. I placed my hand in his. I felt the cool metal of my wedding ring against his skin. It was a heavy ring, solid and real. "I have been ready for 32 years, I said. He pulled me close. One hand rested on my waist, the other held mine against his chest. The band transitioned into a slow, soulful rendition of At Last. It was a cliché perhaps for a wedding, but in that moment every lyric felt like it had been written specifically for the girl who had been abandoned in a snowstorm. As we began to move, swaying gently to the rhythm, I allowed myself to close my eyes. For the first time all day, I took a full, deep breath. The air smelled of vanilla cake and night-blooming jasmine. It did not smell of guilt. Usually when you cut people out of your life, there is a phantom limb pain. You reach for the phone to call them and realize they are not there. You see a meme they would like and your thumb hovers over the share button. I waited for that pain to hit me. I waited for the wave of regret to wash over me, telling me that I was a bad daughter, that I was cruel, that I should have been the bigger person. But the pain never came. Instead, I felt a strange, terrifying lightness. It was the feeling of taking off a backpack filled with bricks that you have been carrying since you were 5 years old. I realized that what I was feeling wasn't loss. It was the absence of anxiety. I wasn't wondering if my mother approved of my dress. I wasn't worrying if Chantelle was jealous of the centerpieces. I wasn't calculating how much this happiness was going to cost me later. Over Elijah's shoulder, I saw movement at the side gate. The security team was escorting 2 figures toward the exit. One was wrapped in a black catering cloak, stumbling slightly in the gravel. The other was walking stiffly, clutching a purse that contained a worthless foreclosure notice. They passed through the iron gates. The heavy metal doors swung shut with a finality that vibrated in my bones. Click. They were gone. Just then a whistling sound pierced the night air. "Look up," Elijah whispered against my ear. I tilted my head back. High above the Dubois estate, the sky exploded. Red, gold, silver. Massive chrysanthemums of fire bloomed against the black canvas of the night. The boom of the fireworks rattled the champagne glasses on the tables. The guests gasped, applauding the spectacle. The light from the explosions reflected in Elijah's eyes. I watched the colors wash over his face. I thought about the family I was born into. A family that saw me as an ATM machine. A family that saw my success as an insult to their mediocrity. They told me that blood was thicker than water. They used that phrase like a chain to bind me to their toxicity. But standing there under the shower of sparks, I realized the truth. Blood is just biology. It is a roll of the genetic dice. But loyalty is a choice. Love is an action. And family is not the people who share your DNA. It is the people who share your values. It is the people who would never leave you in a snowstorm. I rested my head on Elijah's shoulder. I thought about my father Robert sitting in a hospital bed I paid for, complaining about the room. I thought about Tyler sitting in a holding cell, wondering where his next meal would come from. I thought about my mother and sister standing on the side of the road waiting for a taxi they couldn't afford. And I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just peace. I am a surgeon. I spend my life removing tumors. I spend my life cutting away the parts of the body that are trying to kill the patient. It is a bloody, painful process, but it is necessary. If you leave the gangrene, it spreads. If you leave the rot, it consumes the healthy tissue. For years, I tried to heal the gangrene of my family with love and money. I treated the symptoms but ignored the disease. Today, I finally performed the amputation. I cut off the dead weight, and for the first time in my life, I can finally breathe. I looked at my new parents, Percival and Vivian, dancing nearby. Percival winked at me, his hand steady on his wife's back, thanks to the medication I had prescribed. They were my future. The fireworks reached their finale, a blinding white crescendo that turned the night into day. I squeezed Elijah's hand. "I lost a family today," I whispered to the universe. But then I looked around at the estate, at the friends, at the man holding me. But I found myself. The music swelled, the crowd cheered, and Dr. Jada Dubois smiled. A real, genuine smile that started in her soul and radiated out to the world. The surgery was a success. The patient had survived, and the prognosis was excellent. This story teaches us a profound lesson about the true definition of worth and family. Jada's journey from a neglected daughter to a powerful, independent woman demonstrates that we are not obligated to maintain relationships that drain our spirit and exploit our kindness. It reminds us that setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, but an act of self-preservation. We learn that while we cannot choose where we come from, we have the absolute power to choose where we go and who we allow to accompany us. Financial independence is the ultimate shield against manipulation, and true love will always empower you, never diminish you. If you have ever had to make the difficult choice to choose your own peace over family expectations, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to know that it is okay to walk away from toxicity, to find your own happiness. Your new chapter begins the moment you stop rereading the old one. Thank you for watching.